Good afternoon, Scotland. I'm George Galloway. I'm the founder of All for Unity, and I am the lead candidate in Scotland for that alliance, an alliance of left, right, and centre, an alliance of people of all political persuasions and none, an alliance of people who want to save our Scotland from what we believe would be the disaster of separatism, of a hard border just a mile or two from here, a hard border that would separate us from the people that we've lived with, traded with, worked with, married with, had children with, have in-laws with for 300 years and more. We believe that that would be a disaster economically, but also socially and culturally, and definitely politically, and I hope to persuade you of that over the next few minutes. I'm in Gretna Green, but I am with my good wife, so I haven't eloped here to plight my troth to anything other than Britain. Gretna Green is symbolic, of course, of the existence of a Scotland which is different, but which is a part of the greater whole. It's our firmly held belief that that is the way it should be, that that was better than what went before, and that that is the best way for Scotland's future to be ensured. You know, before the Union, we wouldn't have been able to stand here, and none of these businesses, albeit 300 years ago, would have been able freely to trade, to receive customers from everywhere. That would have been impossible because this was an area of absolute lawlessness and brigandry. The border reivers were a real thing. They would raid as far as York, and people, of course, would raid in retaliation, and huge battles were fought in these debatable lands about the existence of authority, about the existence of a state before the Union, which we in Scotland asked for, which was made possible by our king becoming their king, which was made necessary by our madcap colonial adventure in Panama, which bankrupted our country. We asked for the union with England and Wales, and which became the most successful union in political history. No one can doubt that. The values of the Scottish Enlightenment informed that union. Scottish entrepreneurs, inventors, scientists, engineers, lawyers, legislators, people of all kinds went out across these islands and prospered mightily. They prospered and they helped the Union to prosper. Scotland played a big part in the success of Britain over those 3 centuries now and more that we have been together. But Scotland benefited too. When I hear fools talking about Scotland being in shackles, in chains, Scotland as a colony, Scotland colonized half of the world alongside the others in this union. Well, you know me, I'm against colonialism. I'm against occupying other people's countries and stealing their things. I call it imperialism, but whatever you call it, that's what we spent much of the last 3 centuries doing. So don't try to tell me that Scotland is some kind of occupied country. We asked for this union, and we could have left it any time that we chose. But we decided, not even 7 years ago, to remain within it. And we did so decisively, in the words of the Edinburgh Agreement. We did so by what is nowadays a very big margin of more than 55% to less than 45%. And that should have been that, at least for a generation, to borrow the words of Alex Salmond and Nicola Sturgeon. It was one opportunity, after all, they told us, in 1,000 photo shoots with their billboards. Sometimes they said it was once in a lifetime. 7 years is not even the lifetime of a domestic rabbit. And in any case, from the day and hour that the separatists lost that referendum, they launched the never-ending. It is an attempt to divert all of Scotland's political energy, but also business energy, economic energy, not into making Scotland better. As a matter of fact, the SNP have no incentive to make Scotland better. They actually have an incentive for Scotland to get worse. And my goodness, they have achieved that by any metric, by all metrics. Scotland is worse off today than when the SNP came to power 14 years ago. Nicola Sturgeon's out telling us all the things they're going to do if you vote for them on the 6th of May. But they've been in power for 14 years and haven't done any of these things. In fact, have achieved the precise opposite of these things in many cases. Who can take seriously a government promising the earth now, when in the last 14 years they have delivered dirt? And there's plenty of dirt in the SNP's record. You would get bored. You would not be able to stay on the screen long enough if I were now to adumbrate every scandal in which the SNP government at Holyrood is currently embroiled or has swept under the carpet. Trust me, it would take me 2 hours at least just to list them all. And you don't have that kind of time, and neither do I. Nicola Sturgeon will be speaking shortly to announce freedom. Freedom from this lockdown here. Do you know how many cases there were in the Scottish borders last week? Cases of coronavirus. Not people in hospital, not people in intensive care, not people being laid in the ground. Cases. 4 cases of coronavirus in the entire Scottish borders. And yet all these shops are locked. All these cafes are closed. This great gateway, which would normally have people a day, many of these businesses will not even reopen. In fact, thousands of businesses in Scotland will not reopen. People tell me with a straight face that Nicola Sturgeon has handled the pandemic well. Her handling has been a disaster. It's a disaster for the dead. It's a disaster for the bereaved. It was a disaster for the workers in the health service and in the social care sector. It's been a disaster for the economy. It's been a disaster for honour in public life. We live in a country with the closest thing to a state-controlled media to be found anywhere in the Western world. We've got a First Minister who's on television live, unchallenged, 5 days a week for over a year, including now. in the middle of an election campaign. Statements that could and should have been made in the Scottish Parliament and subject to questioning from what passes for the political opposition at Holyrood have instead been made on a television set, where any journalist, and there haven't been many, brave enough to ask difficult questions, gets the bobbing of the heat, the bobbing and weaving, the death stare, and then doesn't get picked to ask any more questions next time. We live in a situation where the First Minister's drivel is treated like liquid gold. It's treated as if it was carved on a stone and brought down from the mountaintop, and it's all rubbish. And it has been deceitful and deliberate rubbish right from the beginning. Right from the Nike conference cover-up, where Nicola Sturgeon's government, her and the other sister, Jean Freeman, mercifully now retired, but if I have anything to do with it, she'll be dragged back into the spotlight to answer for what she now calls mistakes, but which I call crimes in the course of this pandemic. At the Nike conference, there was an outbreak of coronavirus. The Scottish government covered it up. They didn't even report it to the COBRA committee meetings that they were subsequently in. And it spread like wildfire. But they covered it up. They allowed an international rugby match to take place just less than a mile away from the outbreak, where scores of thousands of people congregated, then spilled out into the pubs and cafes and restaurants around it. Right from that moment, the SNP's handling of this pandemic has been a catastrophe, and it turned into carnage. What they now call a mistake of shunting our old people in their thousands to die in care homes without any protection for the old buddies that were already in the care homes, without any protection for the workers, the doctors, the nurses, the cleaners, the catering staff. Thousands of old people with coronavirus were shunted into care homes. They now say it's a mistake. It's manslaughter. That's what it is. It's corporate manslaughter. And those responsible for it must, and if I'm in Holyrood, will be held to account. Then there's the money. It's always worth following the money. Scotland already has a gigantic deficit. Scotland already gets almost £2,000 per head per year from the Exchequer in London than anybody else anywhere in this country. Can you believe that? £1,934 per head per year more than anybody else gets. But on top of that, billions of pounds were sent from London in COVID relief for companies and businesses, like businesses here and everywhere around you, who never received it. Billions are missing, literally missing, unaccounted for. And that money that was spent bears a striking coincidence. And that coincidence is this: the more identified you were as a company or as an individual with the SNP, the more money, the faster you got that money. It's true, isn't it? In fact, the SNP emptied to the bank. And the truth is, if you weren't all for your money, as many are still howling, not laughing all the way to the bank, but crying all the way to the insolvency courts. The SNP are the most corrupt, the most incompetent government Scotland has ever had. And I include the one that launched the Darien expedition, colonial madcap adventure more than 300 years ago. They were called a parcel of rogues in a nation, but they had nothing on Sturgeon and Freeman and Derek Mackay, the sex-text beast, pursuing schoolboys in their school uniforms for improper, immoral purposes. This SNP government stinks to high heaven. These businesses could and should have been opened. Those that were not able to open could and should have been properly compensated. Jobs that have been lost, businesses that have been broken, could and should have been saved. But they were not. Why? It's for the purpose that I alluded to earlier. The SNP have no incentive to make Scotland better. They have actually got an incentive to make Scotland worse. Hoping that the worse it gets, the more you're likely to agree to build a hard border. Along a line a mile or so from here, if that, that's been open for over 300 years. The very people that told us Brexit would be a disaster now want to sex it by building a border here. And of course, for those that say there doesn't need to be a border, of course there does. Of course there does. The SNP want to join the European Union, leaving aside for a moment that there are 10,000 obstacles to that. If they succeeded, there would have to be a hard border. Because if they succeeded, everybody in Eastern Europe, now locked out of the rest of the UK with Brexit, will come here. Not because they want to live in Ecclefechan, but because they want to live and work in Manchester, or in London, or in Birmingham, where a lot of their relatives already are. Sure, they'll come to Ecclefechan. Easy for me to say. Sure, they'll come there, but only as a prelude to coming here. This will become Calais. This will become Sangat, the jungle, where people are camped, waiting for the opportunity to get in the back of a truck or get over the wall into England. This is madness. You really want that for Scotland? Because if you do, you ain't no patriot, bruv. If that's what you want for Scotland, a future as Moldova, then you ain't no Scottish patriot. This is a good country, a good place to live. I'm the father of 6 children, and as soon as I was able to do so, I moved back here. You don't live far from here. The quality of life is very fine. But it's a way of doing with the SNP they have no currency. They admit that they have no economic plan. It's out of date, they say. But vote for it anyway, they say. They promise a future only of grievance and grudge, which will be elevated into a national religion as they seek to blame the other for the failure of their project. The economics that don't add up, the health benefits of being part of a truly national health service, world class, that has vaccinated more than 50 million people, which was developed here on this island by people that we educated and trained. The security benefits. They said that coming out of the European Union would damage the fight against terrorism. What about taking Scotland out of the United Kingdom? How is that going to assist the struggle against terrorism? This vast territory with 4,000 miles of coastline, with no army, no navy, and no air force, and only 5 million people living mainly across the central belt of the country. I'm going to Lockerbie on Thursday, and I'll make, I hope, a significant speech on this point. But make no mistake about this, we're watching this in the rest of the UK. The breakup of Britain automatically becomes a security risk to the rest of the United Kingdom. That shall develop in Lockerbie on Thursday. I hope you'll tune in for that. So the economic case doesn't exist. It's out of date, they say. It was predicated on oil at $117 a barrel. Now they don't want the oil. And in any case, just a couple of months ago, the oil companies were paying people to take the oil. Never mind $117 a barrel. Look, in the end, what worries me most is not the economics. On Friday, it's English language day. How lucky are we that the world's preeminent language is our language? The language of the internet, the language of science, the language of computing, the language of international trade, of aviation, of transport. How lucky are we that the world's #1 language is our language? We're so lucky the SNP are spending your money putting Gaelic subtitles on the Bridge of Allen. Who needs to know what Bridge of Allen is in Gaelic? They're paying you, or rather you're paying them to translate the names of sex toys into Gaelic. I'm not making that up. I wish I was. I wish it was a Derek Mackay sex text. They paid somebody to translate dildo into Gaelic. What madness is this? And just last week they announced that their ambition is that Scotland should become a 100% Gaelic speaking country. Not even 1% of us speak it, so that's an ambition that has some distance to travel. Wouldn't it be better if our schools were teaching English to our children better, so that we might profit more mightily from the preeminence of the English language? Why break up a small island of English-speaking people? Pretend to the Scots that Gaelic is their language. It was never my language, nor the language of anyone connected to me. This is brigadoon obscurantism. Don't fall for it any longer. The cultural, political, and historical importance of defeating this scourge of separatism has never been greater. Not because if Nicola Sturgeon wins on the 6th of May, Scotland will necessarily become independent. It won't. They have no power to make it so. But it will lock you into another 5 years of never-ending, where nothing else matters but getting the ducks in a row to have another go. Don't do it. I beg of you. Don't do it. Save our Scotland. Vote all for unity on the orange-coloured ballot paper, the peach ballot paper. All for Scotland. All for unity. All for the Union. That's where we stand. Here's the message. SNP out. All for unity on the orange ballot paper and on the purple ballot of your own local constituency MSP. Don't vote the way you always did, because if you vote the way you always did, you'll get the result you always got. Look carefully. We've done the work and the maths for you. Vote for the person best placed to defeat the SNP just once, just this time. You can go back to voting for Tweedledee or Tweedledum, one cheek or the other cheek of the same arse. You can do that in the future. But this time, just once, don't vote for Tweedledee if Tweedledee is going to struggle to come front. Vote for the candidate who's best placed to defeat the scourge of separatism. Now, I promised my good wife a trip to Gretna. I told her it would be romantic. I better go now and take her for a walk. Thanks very much.